Everybody, thanks for watching. Just a quick reminder that Afterlife is now available. Also, Merkabah Academy will be launching the 30th, May 30th. So you guys who have become members will receive emails soon about login instructions or what have you. I'll also put a video out on YouTube explaining the website so far. There's going to be, a lot coming to the website. As you will see, it will be a large platform. There will be a lot going on with the site. So it's going to launch May 30th, as I said, the end of May. And it's going to definitely be something that is going to benefit a lot of people. So thanks to everybody who have become members, and to all the people who got in and was able to get the membership, lifetime membership, or what have you. Appreciate you guys' support and patience. Flash drives are also still available. And DVDs are probably not going to be around for much longer. So put out a deal for the DVDs. If you want to get them all, definitely take advantage of them, because the physical DVDs are definitely not going to be around for too much longer. I know as some people who rely specifically on physical DVDs. So if you get the old ones, that'll be okay. I'm going to basically stop selling a lot of the old ones, or probably all of the old ones, and the newer ones will still come out on DVD, but the old ones will probably be gone. So if you want to get the 57 now that's available on DVD, now it's the time to do it, because they're going to be gone pretty soon. So thanks to everybody who supports that. Now, get into this video. Again, we keep seeing a lot with Christians and the debating of the validity of the Bible. And this is just one of the things that you have to be a student of history to really understand how absurd debating the Bible and its validity is, because there's no validity to the book. There's no real history to the book as far as what we have been told, from the Bible. So, the whole story of Moses writing, and, the law he broke and all that kind of stuff, and tribe of Judah and all these tribes having something to do with the creation of the Old Testament. All this stuff is all fictional stuff that you read from a book. There's no proof or fact to any of those stories. It's only stories. So we have to go and look at real actual history as to what proven history tells us, where we get the books from, which I talk about a lot. But in this video right here, you're going to get a real rude awakening as to how much so you don't know about the Old Testament. But talked about before, what we can prove, what history tells us. We have the creation of the Old Testament given to us by the Greeks. Now, when you look at history, real history, you got to look at the time frame. You got to understand that around this time where you have the Septuagint being created, this is the time where you have the Greeks ruling what we know as Israel, as well as Egypt. Now, Egypt was ruled by the ancient Egyptians. That land we call Israel as well, of course, was ruled by the ancient Egyptians. And we got to understand that this territory here was Egyptian territory for a long time. And it was shared by the Greeks. The ancient Egyptians, as I talked about, taught the Greeks, taught the Romans, who during for a long period of time also coexisted in Libya with Africans there. So according to their own history and what they admit themselves, they will tell you completely, yes, Pythagoras, Thales, and all these people, Aristotle and all of them, went into Kemet to learn, and they don't, they admit that. They don't deny it. So we know that's a fact. Now, this is the part that people just got to get in their head, that this happened, that this happened. So the people who think it's just completely crazy and in left field that the Greeks can be responsible for the Bible don't know real history. So when you go back, as I was saying, you have the inception, the creation, the first, notion of an Old Testament or a biblical anything given to us by the Greeks, who, as the letters of Orestes states, that Ptolemy II Philadelphus commissioned 72 Hebrew elders, 6 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, to come to Alexandria, Egypt, to do a translation of the Jewish Hebrew law into Greek. And if you know about Greek mythology, Then you understand about Plato's law. And if you know about Greek history, you know the Greeks basically get Plato's law or the whole concept from the 42 laws of Ma'at. These people all came into Kemet and got that idea from Kemet, plain and simple. So, as the story goes, basically took these 72 Hebrew elders, put them in 72 different rooms, and they all emerged with identical copies of the Septuagint in Greek, which just sounds crazy. And they did it supposedly, I think it was 72 days or what have you. So identical copies, all the same. They all wrote the same thing. Now, we don't have that copy that they supposedly wrote. We don't have it. The only proof we have of the Septuagint is just a fragment, I believe, of Deuteronomy 23. That's it. That's all we have that exists of the original, supposedly one of the original Septuagints. But that fragment predates anything that would be Hebrew. So again, you know, when you look at this right here, you know, it's talking about the Hebrew law, the Hebrew Bible. We never had this. We have never had any proof that this existed, that it's real. This is what you got to get in your head. We have never had it. The only mention of this would be, of course, from your Bible, and of course from the letters of Orestes, of this supposedly being, you know, Hebrew. But it says, again, clearly here, you have the Septuagint Greek. And the Septuagint, you know, given to us, you know, by the Greeks, again, going back in history and understanding at this time, you know, you had the Greeks ruling the land that we know as Israel as well as Egypt. So they had this land. There is absolutely no mention by anybody, any Greek historian, any Greek scholar, ancient Greek, nobody from around that time is talking about any Jews or any Hebrews. Nobody. There's no mention. Now, you have to go back and look throughout the world. Every civilization, every group of people that we know of that did anything near the level that the Jews supposedly have done when you read the Bible, there's proof. There are, you know, monuments. There are, you know, ruins. There are bodies, tombs, so on and so forth. Writings. Because you would have to think that somebody from the civilization wrote something other than what was biblical, or wrote at least about the religion or something, you know, having to do with their life or what was going on with the wars. I mean, you have all these wars with the Hebrew Israelites going on, and it's nobody documenting these wars besides, you know, supposedly the Bible, but no person outside of that. You know, why is nobody talking about this? Why is there isn't any cave art or pictures or paintings or anything that would give validity to the story that we read in the Bible? Nothing at all. Plain and simple. Also, when you go into Israel, there are way more ancient Egyptian artifacts found than anything belonging to any Hebrew Israelite during the same time. So supposedly you had the Hebrews ruling in this land. We find absolutely nothing that would put them there during that time, predating anything or existing around the same time as anything that's ancient Egyptian, plain and simple. So what we get all the time is this pottery stuff. You get pottery shards and stuff that look like, you know, somebody wrote on it 2 days ago that supposed to be, you know, Hebrew or Paleo Hebrew, that for some reason they can't determine or give a true date. Is always speculated that this is a date, but it doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense to find these so-called pottery shards and don't find anything else. Whereas with ancient Egypt, the ancient Egyptians, we find all of this stuff: jewelry, pottery out the ass with clear, legible writing that is ancient Egyptian. You find this here. They found this foot, this part of a statue that was found near Galilee. So it's like we're finding tons and tons of ancient Egyptian artifacts in Israel, but nothing from the so-called Hebrew Israelites themselves. And you got to think about that. You got to really look at that. And again, you know, I talk about this stuff a lot, but I'm really putting this out. It's a lot of people really coming out of Christianity and really digging into or trying to figure out the truth about all this. And this is what you need to run into, because A lot of people don't look for this stuff. A lot of people have no clear understanding of where to start, nor do they know what the Septuagint is or anything else. But you got to look at this stuff. And you got to understand that for hundreds of years, the people around that area spoke Greek. There was just no Hebrew. It's no proof of Hebrew. So again, you got to think about that. For all this time, where is the Hebrew philosophers and the Hebrew poets? Where are the poems and paintings or anything with Hebrew writing on it? There's nothing. Absolutely nothing. Until we pop up, boom, and start getting the biblical text later on that's in Hebrew, like the Masoretic text and stuff like that. We start getting that stuff that's in Hebrew that's way late. It's not even BC. We're talking about AD stuff now. You have to also look at the books that we would get that will eventually give us lead up to the New Testament coming from the Romans. So again, you have to look at actual history in accordance to this biblical time, which, as we see, you had the Greeks ruling and basically pushing this doctrine, and then eventually Rome would take over, and then all of a sudden we get the New Testament. And a lot of people is not putting this together. It's like don't seem weird to nobody. It don't seem weird that during this time where you have the Greeks ruling in Egypt as well as Israel, that we get basically the inception of the Old Testament, given to us by the Greeks, not by no Hebrews. There's no proof Hebrews give us anything. It's just a so-called story that has been proven to be false. And then around the same time, we had the Romans ruling. Not only do they continue Hellenization, a practice that the Greeks was doing, they continue that for years. But then all of a sudden during their reign, we get the New Testament, and they give it to us in Latin. So you got to think about that. So you have Vetus Latina, that's supposed to be old. It's basically called Old Italia. Old Italian, that is written in, where you have different scholars or different not translations, but different scribes, I should say, basically giving us these versions of the Old and New Testament that basically is supposed to come from the Septuagint. So you get St. Jerome that comes on later and gives us the Latin Vulgate. I talked about all this before. In the Latin Vulgate, St. Jerome decides to basically switch up a bunch of the lingo and the words and the stories in the Latin Vulgate to basically go off of what the Hebrews of the time was speaking. And again, this is AD. This is not BC stuff we're talking. So he got a lot of criticism on that, which will later lead to everything else with the codices and everything like that. So you got to look at all this. And then how did the Septuagint fall the way it fell when you had the control that Rome had on the books? The Vetus Latina and the Latin Vulgate supposedly contains the entire Septuagint. So you got to think about that. But yet we only have a fragment that survives to this day that we don't really know how old that is. So all of it is suspect. It's all suspect. And you got to look at it all. As again, I talked about Dr. Joseph Yehuda, who gave us the book Hebrew is Greek, where he proves 100%, and I will say it again, 100%, he proved it. The book has been reviewed, and there is nothing nobody can say. He proves it. It's 100% proven. So when we get into this lingo, this so-called debate about it, it's done. There's not really no debate. That proves it right there, which is why I've been showing you guys that book for years. Find it today. You can't find it. Last I checked, it was worth $7,000. I told you guys about it when it would cost $700. I said, buy it. I keep bringing that up, but they're gone. You can't find them. And in that book, he proves that Hebrew comes from Greek, as well as Arabic comes from Greek. But it gets deeper, as we're going to get into in a second. I've been putting out the ancient history series and the Bible series I've been putting out to really get you guys to see the history and like what this stuff is really talking about and where they're getting this stuff from. If you read and study Greek mythology, it's clear as day where this stuff is coming from. And it's not me just saying this. Again, I get a lot of backlash from people who don't know nothing. I mean, these people ain't doing no damn research. It's shit crazy to even come at me knowing you ain't did no damn research. A lot of people can't even fathom that the Bible could have stolen from Greek mythology, because in their heads they think, well, this stuff happened before Greek mythology. But people really don't understand how far back Greek mythology goes. We're talking about prior to 1000 BCE. Proven. Isn't it? This is proven. So we had Greek writers way back then who was writing books and had stories. Basically, when you trace it back, mimicking ancient Egyptian mythology. Same thing, Greek mythology. I already went through all that. Rome did the same thing once they came into the sole understanding of what the Greeks was doing, and they jumped on the bandwagon and seeing how powerful it was, and they basically stole from Greek mythology and started creating this Roman mythology. So when you see Roman mythology, Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology, I mean, it all stems from Egyptian mythology, but it's the same stuff. Plain and simple. So a lot of people can't fathom that, and I challenge anybody. I don't care who you go get or what you try to cite or what have you. No one can show you anything biblical that was written before 1000 BCE. Plain and simple. And prove it. I'm not talking about no pottery shards and no bullshit that they keep popping up with that's supposedly Paleo-Hebrew. And if you don't understand about the lingo around that time or what they're actually trying to do, piggybacking on the language that, you know, when the Greeks is basically trying to get the alphabet from out of the Phoenicians, which the Phoenicians get the alphabet from the ancient Egyptians. So they're trying to use the Phoenician conversion, or the Greek, I should say, conversion of the Phoenician alphabet into Greek from ancient Egyptian, and try to use that and say it's Paleo-Hebrew, or this is where the stuff is coming from. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. They're trying to do anything they can to put the Hebrews in position. The biggest question you got to ask yourself is, why ain't nobody talking about them? Why hasn't anybody mentioned them? How come we can't find no bodies or no tombs or no homes or what have you? Nothing. We can find nothing from these people. And nobody's talking about them. So this is what you got to ask yourself. So we go back and look. You have to look at these stories and understand where the stuff comes from. As I said before, you have Adam and Eve, Pandora. Plain and simple. The story is just clear as day to see where they copied it from. Noah's Ark is Deucalion and the Pharaoh, but there's other stories that we'll get into in a second. You have Samson and Hercules. I mean, it just goes on and on. And it's so easy to see what it is. It's just when you explain it to people, the fact that it is so easy. Like when you say Samson or Hercules, people say, you know, that's too easy for it to be true. But that's what it is. Now, there are many books on this subject. It's a lot of people who talked about this stuff. It's a lot of scholars who have decades ago already made and proven the comparison to the Bible, Old Testament, and Greek mythology. And it's not hard to do if you read Greek mythology. You only get certain parts of it, but it's a lot of anything having to do with Homer and the Iliad and all those other great ancient Greek works. When you start to read them and really get into the story, it's clear as day. The biggest gimme is Plato's Law. So now it says here, Plato, in the creation of the Hebrew Bible, for the first time compares the ancient law collections of the ancient Near East, the Greeks, and the Pentateuch to determine the legal antecedents, which antecedents basically means predecessor, what preceded, for the biblical law. Following on from his 2006 work, Berosus and Genesis, Manetho and Exodus, Merkabah takes up his theory that the Pentateuch was written around 270 BCE using Greek sources found in the Great Library of Alexandria, and implies this to an examination of the biblical law codes. A striking number of legal parallels are found between the Pentateuch and Athenian law, and specifically with those found in Plato's law of circa 350 BCE. Constitutional features in biblical law, Athenian law, and Plato's law also contain close correspondence. Several genres of biblical law, including the Decalogue, are shown to have striking parallels with Greek legal collections, and the synthesis of narrative and legal content is shown to be compatible with Greek literature. All this evidence points to direct influence from Greek writing especially Plato's law, on a biblical legal tradition. Finally, it is argued that the creation of the Hebrew Bible took place according to the program found in Plato's law for creating a legally authorized national ethical literature, reinforcing the importance of this specific Greek text to the authors of the Torah and Hebrew Bible in the early Hellenistic era. This study offers a fascinating analysis of the background of the Pentateuch and will be of interest not only to biblical scholars but also to students of Plato, ancient law, and Hellenistic literary traditions. Now let me explain for a quick second. You gotta understand. Now, for anybody, forensic, you have people who do handwriting analysis and people who do plagiarism analysis. People who really do this is like a profession. So it's very easy for someone to look at a writing style and compare it to another writing style. Now, you got to think about the mind and the way it works. You can't do something you was never taught to do. You understand what I'm saying? So you have people who write a certain way back then in ancient Greeks, the way they write stories. So what they did was look at the way ancient Greek stories was written, the pattern. It's a specific method that stories was written. And they look at that and they compare it to the Bible. And it's the same type of pattern, the same type of, protagonist, antagonist type stories and theories and so on and so forth that match up with Greek mythology and ancient Greek stories. So based on that, they can look at that and say, this wasn't written by Hebrew. This isn't something that was just passed down and somebody writing an account of something that happened. This is written and structured the way an ancient Greek, story would be structured. Meaning that somebody Greek wrote it. Plain and simple. It's not something that should be anywhere like Greek if it was written by 72 Hebrew elders that have no understanding or idea of this ancient Greek story that, supposedly didn't exist before the time this stuff was being written. If you understand what I'm saying, like, it shouldn't be the same. So how is it that, the going-ons and happenings of the ancient Hebrew Israelites, the story that they memorized, supposedly in the oral Torah, memorized, and everybody memorized this oral Torah, they have this whole, mindset on how it's supposed to be pronounced. How is it that it comes out in the same type of form as Greek mythological story or Greek story? It shouldn't come out that way. It says here, in 2011, the classical scholar Bruce Loudon also reached a similar conclusion, namely that some biblical books might have been influenced directly or indirectly by Homer's writing. Brody Loudon and I have independently made similar observations about the story of Joseph in Genesis 37-50 in comparison to Odysseus' return to Ithaca. That's from the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey 14-24, and have also reached similar conclusions regarding the number of parallels between Homer's Odyssey and Genesis. The similar order in which these parallels appear indicate that Genesis was modeled after the Odyssey. Loudon writes, the parallels and the divergencies suggest to me both that some from the Odyssey served as a model for individual parts of Genesis, particularly the myth of Joseph, and that, like the Odyssey, the redactors of Genesis link together many different genres of myth to form parts of a larger Gnostis return story. Now, a Gnostis is basically like a Greek story where the hero returns home by sea, like, Deucalion the Pharaoh or like Odysseus. So it says here, there's already sufficient evidence to propose that Genesis' use of Homer is a reasonable working hypothesis. The author of Genesis used the Odyssey, especially in composing chapters 11-50. The unified way in which Genesis uses the Odyssey indicates that Genesis as a whole reflects a single process of composition. Now let's look at some of these similarities. The cycle of Abraham shows similarities to the epic of the Argonauts. Abraham almost sacrificed his son Isaac to Yahweh, but an angel stopped him at the last moment. Instead of his son, Abraham sacrificed a ram, which he found stuck in the thicket by its horns. Yahweh then renewed the promise that Abraham's descendants would inherit the land of Canaan. Genesis 22. Quite similarly, Artemis, king of Boeotia, almost sacrificed his son, Phrixus, to Zeus. But a winged golden ram took Phrixus on its back and brought him safe to Colchis. And there, Phrixus sacrificed it to Zeus and hung its golden fleece on an oak tree. One generation later, Jason and the Argonauts set sail to Colchis to bring the golden fleece back to Greece. On the way back, while the Argonauts were stranded on the coast of Libya, Euphemus received the promise by the god Trenton that his descendants would inherit the land of Cyrene. Generations later, Bathus, a descendant of Euphemus, consulted the oracle of Delphi about his stutter. The voice of the god Apollo ordered him to take the descendants of Euphemus to the promised land of Cyrene. Although Bathyus first protested that he did not feel up to the task and that he stuttered, he eventually led his people to Cyrene and ruled over them for 40 years. What does this sound like, people? The story is quite strikingly similar to that of Abraham receiving the promise of a land for his descendants, and Moses fulfilling this promise by bringing the Israelites to the gates of Canaan. Like Bathyus, or Battus, how we pronounce that, Moses too at first protested, arguing that he could not speak well. Exodus 4:10, we all know this, and led his people for 40 years in the wilderness. Deuteronomy 1:3. Now this isn't even all of them. There's a lot more stories that we find that basically parallels the Bible, or the Bible parallels Greek mythology, and we can see where it came from. It's clear as day what happened, and it's not going to be easy for people to see it unless you go back and look at Greek mythology and start reading stories. But then again, you have to have a knowledge of the Bible and biblical stories, which is why I tell you guys to read a book for you to pick up on that. So it's something that's easy. It's just not hard at all for people to really see it when you know the stories and when you read them and then you parallel with the Bible. And then what these people have done was basically take that way of writing, the way they wrote back then, the way they even spoke, and it's the same as the Old Testament. So we can see what they did and where the stories came from. And again, you got to go back and look at the fact that the Bible, it changed so much. It changed a lot. And when you add it to actual history, it all fits. The fact that, as I said, during this time that the book was put together, you have just so happened to have the Greeks ruling Israel and Egypt. Like, come on, step out of it. They are ruling Israel and Egypt during this time that we get the book. It's put together in Alexandria, Egypt, where the Great Library is. They are in control. You have Ptolemy, ruling in Egypt. Or Ptolemy, however you want to pronounce it. It's common sense to put it together. So everything that these people keep coming out of nowhere, because I done heard so much backlash and I done been cussed out so many times by so many people who just swear they got it, but can't give you one shred of proof. It's all coming from a book where the book itself is in question. Their proof is the Bible itself. Nobody, I don't care who you go and get or talk to, is going to come up and give you proof like I just gave you that gives validity to the book. But we can go back and prove 100% these stories existed long before any proven anything we have biblical. Plain and simple. Put it together. Plain and simple. Who gave us the book? The Greeks. Who was ruling around that time? The Greeks. Who was the story mimicking? Greek mythology. Greek stories. It's crazy. So when I talked about in the ancient history series about the wars of the Diadochi and the conquest of the Hebrew Israelites, and basically they're giving you what they did as far as their conquest of North Africa and African lands. Plain and simple. They wrote it because there's only one people who could have wrote it or who could have that kind of insight during that time in that area. We didn't write it. because we will be the only ones that's up there that would have that kind of vision to see what was going on. And there's no mention of no damn Jews or Hebrews from anybody else. And the wars don't even mention them when we know the wars is between the Greeks themselves, the successors of Alexander. So who was up there in real history? What's going on in real history? The Greeks are up there. And then they put this together. Now, again, if you didn't see a lot of my older videos, you probably don't understand why. The reason why is this. One, because you gotta understand first, the people that was in that territory, in that land that we call Israel, was ancient Egyptian, black African people. That's who was there. Plain and simple, which as I've shown you, they keep finding artifacts up there because the Egyptians ruled that land, which is why you have to ask yourself, even if, the Exodus happened, and let's say they did wander for 40 years and eventually lead, find themselves back in Israel, the Egyptians still was ruling. Plain and simple. So why would you come into a land that's ruled by Egyptians? So when they telling you all these stories about, the Israelites going into these lands and conquering these people and killing the Amalekites and all these people and taking Israel, taking those lands, this is African people's territory. So, the Egyptians was there. This African people that was there. We can't find nowhere in history that shows us where you have these people called Hebrews and Jews taking lands from the Jebusites or the Hivites or the Perizzites or any of these people that they mention, let alone find those people themselves. We can't find nothing from these people. They only exist in the book. So, causing the question, the stories that for some reason people want to believe and jump on so much, there's no validity to it. There's no proof to it. And again, when you look at a lot of the Greek mythology stories, that's where they got it from. It's clear as day that you can look and see that. Now, those Egyptians or Africans that was in Israel during that time, when the Persians first took over, it was civil war. Basically, them trying to basically take back, the land from the Persians. And during that time, they fighting, and a lot of people are leaving Israel and leaving ancient Egypt, to flee into, Southern Africa. And eventually, Persians gain control. Greeks come in and take it from the Persians. You still have black Africans there, and them trying to instill and change the beliefs of these people. And as I always talk about, they do so through generational indoctrination. You start with the children. It's the same way they do it today. The kids learn something, we die and we move on. The kids move up and they pass that knowledge on, and they grow up with that knowledge, and that knowledge becomes fact. So now the later generations are doing what they were taught to be doing from a young age. So whatever the people was believing as far as having knowledge of ancient Egypt and what was really going on, well, by the time they died off, the children was bringing up that religion and bringing up that knowledge and keeping it as if, it was real, that it's real information. But what was going on was you had Hellenization, which Hellenization is what they tell you is it's basically them instilling Greek beliefs and what have you into the people that was in those lands that they took over during the War of the Diadochis. The thing is this: if that was the case, how come none of these people end up following any kind of Greek, mythology or Greek religion? Yet all these people end up being Jews or Christians in these lands. Because that's what they was passing down. This is what they were spreading. There was no damn Greek mythology. It was them enforcing and instilling Judaism, and later on, when the Romans, Christianity. So when you have the Hebrew Israelites, when they go back and they look, and they say, Greek, the Hebrews or the Jews, the doctrine is old and it goes back far. It does not go back before the 4th century BCE, plain and simple. It does not go back before the time the Greeks ruled Egypt and Israel. It don't. So if you go back and you trace it BC, fine. It's going to stop at the 4th century. And probably sooner than that, when you pay attention. But we give them around that time frame, basically in the 300s BCE, when the Greeks was ruling. So you can find that history, you can find that information, you can find stuff that traces back then, but you won't find anything before that, and you won't find any real concrete proof of the stories itself. Just the fact that you had people walking around talking about this religion. And that's it. There's no proof, there's no validity to it. A lot of the stuff that was actually going on had to do with other stuff, non-relating to the Bible. But when you have after the fact, vis-a-vis the King James Version and all these other books that was written after the fact, that they can basically say this happened, even though they're writing the book after the fact, then you can put anything. You can put anything, I can write a book today about something I'm going to do 2 years from now. As long as I do it, the book is valid. So what I try to do is get a lot of people to go back and look at real ancient history. Forget about biblical history. Not going to find anything in that. As I said, the Bible is not backed up by proven history. It is not proven, which is why it requires faith. Plain and simple. You can't prove it. So the best thing to do is when you start going back and looking at real proven history and try to compare it to the Bible, it's not going to match up. It's just not going to match up. You had a people during a certain period of time conquering the known world. The Greeks, you had the Persians, you had the Romans, plain and simple. Later on the Arabs, and then you look today and you see, who is where they are, who is at the top of the power structure and how they got there. And as I said, it goes all the way back to that point, even though it's hard for people to believe, but it's true. It goes all the way back there. And they have been building power, and it's been a slow, long takeover to put them in the position that they are in. Biblical religion, the Abrahamic religion, is just a tool that they use to get them to where they are at today. So again, a lot of you guys doing your research, as I said, you have to go back and look at real history. A lot of people are going back to try to find out what people said instead of looking at actual history. Because remember, no matter, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, these people are talking about stuff that's supposed to have actually happened. So in your research, okay, well, let me go back and find it. And if you go back and look, the only reference you're going to get for these religious accounts is in religious books, not from another people. And that's the thing. And that's how we tell, we can't prove it, because any of the wars, or the great wars and a lot of stuff that happened back in ancient times, guess what? People talked about it. They wrote about it. We can find the bodies. We can find everything. It's all there. All that stuff is there, except for the biblical accounts. The whole wars with the Israelites or what have you. You can't find the stuff. So you got to really take that into consideration and do your research and really pay attention and look. They gave us the book. It's given to us by the Greeks. The whole King James Version, as I always talk about, is King James's version. Plain and simple. If you look at the Codex Sinaiticus, as I always talk about, when I said before that, Deuteronomy is probably one of the oldest. The only actual proof we have of the Septuagint is a little fragment of Deuteronomy 23, I believe it is. But, if you go back, you have Codex Sinaiticus, and they only have a few chapters of Deuteronomy. It's like 3, 4, I believe it's 28 through 30. And that's it. And as I talked about, Deuteronomy 28:68 and the oldest manuscript don't say the same as the King James Version, because that's his version. So even when you get that book, which we all grew up on that, none of us grew up on none of these ancient manuscripts and what they said. It's a totally different book we grew up on. And as I talked about before as well, how come we got so many different books? Look at all these books that we got and all these people who wrote Bibles, different Bibles with different stuff. You got to pay attention to that. You got to take that into consideration. And the biggest part of all is, where's God in all this? Where is God preserving the Bible and making sure we get his word, the way we're supposed to get it? And we got all this stuff that we can't prove. We have errors and mistakes, which I didn't even touch on that. The fact that, we have so many mistakes and errors when they put together the Bible, because when we go back and look at the older manuscripts, they are flawed. And, what is that? You got stuff that was added, stuff that's taken away, so on and so forth. It's a lot. It's a lot. And no sane person or anybody that has a rational mind can look at all this overwhelming evidence against the book and just decide to accept it. Now, the book is giving you truth, plain and simple. That's one thing I will tell you. It is giving you the truth disguised. It's a deceptive book and it's a truthful book. The book itself is duality. It's yin yang, it's good, bad, evil, happy, whatever you want to put. It's a dualistic book that is giving you the truth. It's giving it to you in parables. And it's all dealing with stuff that ultimately traces back to ancient Egypt when you pay attention. So science, math, everything is in that book. It's all there. And you got to know how to break it apart and understand, what it's talking about. So as I talked about in the DVD put out just now on Afterlife, you got to understand the role that you play. You guys understand the role of, God, Jesus, Satan, and the disciples. As I said, God is you, plain and simple. God represents your all-powerful subconscious mind. Jesus represents the part of your subconscious that's trying to get into communication with you, that's trying to teach you and get you to join him. Remember, I talked about yin and yang. You got to understand how to bring the subconscious and the conscious mind together. This is what Jesus is trying to tell you in the book. He's trying to get you to join him. You are the disciples as well. Because the disciples are doing what? They are following Jesus, trying to understand what Jesus is talking about. Jesus is basically telling them, you're going to know this is that. And they're like, man, we don't know what you're talking about. How can we know this stuff? It's your subconscious trying to speak to you and tell you what's going on. As I said, who are the 12 disciples? The 12 signs of the zodiac, representing all of us. We are all represented on that zodiac. Satan, you as well, represents the negative side of you, the bad side of you, the side that's against you, your anti-self. We are all anti-self. We are all pro-self. You do things that go against your well-being. You do things that's for your well-being. You do things that you completely should not do that's going to mess with you and harm you. And, you do things that's good. It's just that part of you that won't allow you to be perfect that you have to master and beat. Plain and simple. I always talk about why don't God just kill Satan in the Bible? Because he is Satan as well as God. It's a dualistic book. Jesus is trying to prepare you for the afterlife, trying to prepare you to be a part of him, to be one with your subconscious, to become one. And it's deep. It's a lot to it. A lot of people are just not going to grasp that unless you understand, what this stuff is all about. As I talked about in the DVD, understanding when Jesus says in John 14:3, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I shall come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, you may be also. And you got to think about that. If I come again. Now, when is Jesus supposed to come again? At the end, right? End times. This is something that's so personalized when you really think about it, what's being said. I'm going to come again and receive you unto myself. First, we're going to go and prepare a place for you. What place is he going to prepare that's not already been prepared? Ain't heaven supposed to already exist and it's supposed to be, angels and a whole bunch of stuff going on in heaven? So what place is he going to prepare for you? If heaven already exists and God's supposed to be there, and everything's supposed to be taken care of. What place is he going to prepare for you? And as I said, you got to think about the dream world. You have to think about meditation. You have to think about when you daydream. Where do you go? You have a dream where you have a whole entire city and a whole bunch of stuff going on in your dream. When you go to sleep, that place is already prepared for you. You're in there and you think that's, real life and what's going on, but it's not. It's something that's controlled by your subconscious who's trying to get you to understand what's going on. That is the Jesus part of you. Jesus is trying to contact you and get into communication with you, which is you yourself, trying to get you to understand what's going on. So when it says I want to go and prepare a place for you, every night a place is prepared for you to go. I'm going to come again. That's your death. And receive you unto myself. Receive your consciousness, your true energy unto his self or herself, which is why Jesus is shown as androgynous when you pay attention, because there's either masculine energy or feminine energy. And you become one and you move forward if you make it to that point. If you don't, you're going to be dragged by your negative part. Hell, Satan, which this is hell when you understand the concept. We talked about all this in the Afterlife DVD, went in deep on that. But you got to understand the metaphorical part of the book and what all of these things is talking about and what it plays to. And understand that what they did was take the Greek mythological stories. It's basically telling you the same shit. It's telling you the same stuff. Same dualistic story, same metaphorical stuff, just different characters, so on and so forth, that they plagiarized, as well as stories from ancient Egypt, stories from ancient Sumeria, Babylonia, so on and so forth, to give you, the Bible. All of it is dealing with dualistic stuff, dealing with your energy, your mortality, your physical self, your spiritual self, so on and so forth. And as I said, a lot of people think this stuff is a joke. A lot of people are just going to be stuck and lost and have no idea of the regret that they're going to have at some point, and it's just going to be crazy. But it's deep stuff, and I challenge a lot of people who I talk to, who I debate with on this information, to basically stop bullshitting. Go and look, be real. Don't go look for the pro Bible scholars, or don't go look for stuff that's going to be speaking to your ego. Truth. Go and look for the truth. Go and search. Use rational thinking and use that common sense that you have to put the pieces together. If you do that, there's no way. Man, forget that. If you just read the damn book. Just read the book. Like I said, if you make the first Samuel, you're no longer a Christian. I guarantee you that. If you read Genesis to just First Samuel, where we stopped there, where we at so far, it's over. You're going to be like, nah, bullshit. One, the Hebrew shit is going to be gone, because you're going to understand that ain't no people in the world that stupid. And two, you're going to realize how fucking crazy and psycho God is and how sick he is. And that's definitely not something you should follow. You got to understand the metaphor it's giving you. As I said, Satan has not appeared and done anything sick on this planet that we can see, but we have. Mankind has done sick, evil stuff on this planet that represents the evil that's in us all, not this one being that we want to pour all our bad shit into, So it's a lot of deep stuff. And it's a lot of videos I have out, over 700 videos on YouTube now. A lot of stuff I get into with this. And it's going to be a lot on the website to really touch on a lot of this stuff more, to get people in that understanding. So Merkabah Academy definitely going to help a lot of new people. I have a lot of people that I talk to that's Christians that's really coming here. It's going to come to that site to really get an understanding on, a lot of people want to know what to teach their kids and just, have the information for themselves. So we're going to get into all that. Again, the book will be releasing June 21st. If you pre-order it, they're going to be shipped out June 17th. Anybody who's waiting for flash drives, they're on the way. Thanks for your patience on that matter as well. But I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and thanks to everybody who's been supporting, and I'll see you guys next video.